overall posture that this will give to the Philippine Navy and the AFP is that we have more capable ships that could patrol our maritime domain for longer periods of time. And they are fully supported through our forward operating bases.
In the middle of the South China Sea sits a rusting World War II-era ship. It doesn't sail, it doesn't carry missiles, and it barely looks seaworthy. Yet that ship has become one of the most important military outposts in Asia. Its name is BRP Sierra Madre, and keeping it supplied has repeatedly brought Philippine vessels into confrontations with much larger Chinese forces. That challenge raises a simple question. How does a country made up of 7,641 islands defend its maritime claims against one of the world's largest naval powers? The answer begins with ships. In 2010, the Philippine Navy had no modern guided missile frigates. By 2026, it operated 4. That single statistic tells the story of one of Southeast Asia's most dramatic naval transformations. And over the last decade, the Philippines has been building a very different navy. The result is a list that goes beyond missiles and specifications. Let's discuss how things have changed today with the ranking of 10 most important ships in the Philippine Navy today. And at number 10 is a vessel that carries almost no missile firepower at all. Yet without it, the Navy would struggle to move forces across the archipelago. The carrier of armies, BRP Davao del Sur. At first glance, BRP Davao del Sur seems out of place on this list. It carries no anti-ship missiles, no vertical launch system, and none of the advanced combat capabilities found on the frigates ranked above it. But naval power isn't just about sinking enemy ships. It's also about moving forces where they're needed. And few ships in the Philippine Navy are more important for that mission than BRP Davao del Sur. Commissioned in 2017, the Tarlac-class landing platform dock can transport hundreds of troops, military vehicles, landing craft, helicopters, and humanitarian supplies across the archipelago. For Philippines, that capability is invaluable. The ship has supported major exercises, disaster relief missions, and amphibious operations, proving that logistics can be just as strategic as firepower. Its biggest weakness is self-defense. In a high-threat environment, Davao del Sur would rely on escorts to protect it from aircraft, missiles, or enemy warships. But future upgrades, including close-in weapon systems and short-range air defense missiles, could improve its survivability significantly. BRP Davao del Sur ranks 10th because it cannot dominate a naval battle. But without ships like it, the Philippines would struggle to move and sustain forces across its vast maritime territory. Most patrol vessels are designed for a specific mission. BRP Raja Lakandula is different. Commissioned in 2026, it is one of the newest ships in the Philippine Navy and part of the 6-vessel Raja Sulaiman-class offshore patrol vessel program. While its current armament is relatively modest, a 76mm main gun and secondary autocannons, the real value of this ship lies in its future potential. Built by HD Hyundai Heavy Industries in South Korea, the class was designed with modularity in mind. That means future mission packages could add anti-submarine warfare systems, more advanced sensors, and potentially missile capabilities without requiring an entirely new ship design. For the Philippines, that's a significant advantage. The Navy must patrol a vast maritime domain while operating under budget constraints. A platform that can evolve over time provides flexibility that older patrol vessels simply cannot match. Raja Lakandula also brings modern radar systems, electronic warfare equipment, and an integrated combat management system, giving it far better situational awareness than many of the ships it is gradually replacing. Today, it is primarily a patrol vessel. Tomorrow, it could become something much more capable. That growth potential is what earns BRP Raja Lakandula the number 9 spot on our list. Some ships are important because of what they can do. Others are important because of what they represent. BRP Raja Sulaiman is both. Arriving in the Philippines in January 2026 and commissioned the following month, it became the first ship of the new Raja Sulaiman class and the first of 6 offshore patrol vessels planned for the fleet. Its mission is straightforward but critical: maintaining a constant Philippine presence at sea. That may sound simple, but in maritime strategy, presence matters. You cannot monitor waters you rarely patrol, and you cannot defend maritime claims if you are not there. Designed for long-endurance operations, Raja Sulaiman combines modern sensors, electronic warfare systems, an integrated combat management system, and a helicopter-capable flight deck into a platform built for daily operations across the country's vast maritime domain. This is especially important in the West Philippine Sea, where patrol vessels are often the first line of presence and surveillance. Unlike the missile frigates higher on this list, Raja Sulaiman is not designed to fight major naval battles. Its job is to show the flag, monitor activity, respond to incidents, and maintain awareness across thousands of square kilometers of ocean. That combination of operational importance and future growth potential places BRP Raja Sulaiman at number 8 on our ranking. If BRP Raja Sulaiman is about presence, BRP Tarlac is about reach. Commissioned in 2016, Tarlac became the first modern amphibious ship in Philippine Navy service and introduced a capability the fleet had long lacked: strategic sealift. Built in Indonesia by PT PAL, the ship can transport hundreds of troops, military vehicles, landing craft, helicopters, and humanitarian supplies across vast distances. Its importance extends far beyond military operations. The Philippines is regularly hit by typhoons, floods, earthquakes, and volcanic eruptions. When roads, ports, or airports are damaged, ships like Tarlac become lifelines, delivering food, medical teams, heavy equipment, and emergency supplies to affected communities. The ship has also participated in major multinational exercises, helping improve amphibious and joint force operations with regional partners. What pushes Tarlac above its sister ship, Davao del Sur, is its legacy. Its biggest weakness remains self-defense. However, future upgrades could significantly improve survivability. But for now, BRP Tarlac remains one of the fleet's most important force multipliers. Because before a military can fight, it has to arrive. When BRP Jose Rizal entered service in 2020, it marked a turning point in Philippine naval history. Built by Hyundai Heavy Industries in South Korea, it became the country's first modern guided missile frigate and introduced capabilities the Navy had never possessed before: anti-ship missiles, anti-submarine warfare systems, advanced radar, and the ability to operate the AW-159 Wildcat helicopter. For decades, the Philippine Navy had focused primarily on patrol duties and maritime security operations. Jose Rizal signaled a shift toward modern naval warfare. But its greatest contribution wasn't just its weapons. It became the Navy's classroom for a new generation of sailors and officers. Through exercises such as RIMPAC and Balikatan, crews learned how to integrate missiles, sensors, helicopters, and allied forces into a modern combat system. One milestone came during Balikatan 2024, when the ship successfully launched a Sea Star anti-ship missile against a target vessel, demonstrating that modernization had become operational reality. So why isn't it ranked higher? Because despite its importance, the Jose Rizal-class still carries a major limitation. Its planned vertical launch air defense system remains unfilled, leaving a capability gap that newer frigates have begun to address. Without BRP Jose Rizal, there would be no modern Philippine missile frigate force. It is the ship that proved the Navy could operate a true 21st century warship. If BRP Jose Rizal introduced the missile frigate era, BRP Antonio Luna helped make it operational. Commissioned in 2021, Antonio Luna is the second ship of the Jose Rizal class and remains one of the most important surface combatants in the Philippine Navy. On paper, it is nearly identical to its sister ship. It carries the same anti-ship missiles, anti-submarine weapons, advanced radar systems, and AW-159 Wildcat helicopter capability. The difference lies in experience. By the time Antonio Luna entered service, the Navy had already begun adapting to modern naval warfare. Training had improved, procedures had matured, and crews had gained valuable experience operating a guided missile frigate. As a result, Antonio Luna became part of the process of turning modernization from a project into a permanent capability. The ship has participated in major exercises, regional engagements, and patrols in the West Philippine Sea, helping strengthen both operational readiness and cooperation with allied navies. Together with BRP Jose Rizal, it formed the backbone of Philippine naval combat power throughout the early 2020s. Like its sister ship, Antonio Luna still lacks a fully activated vertical launch air defense capability, preventing it from ranking even higher. Antonio Luna represents the point where the Philippine Navy stopped learning how to operate modern frigates and started mastering them. That is why it narrowly edges out BRP Jose Rizal and takes the number 5 spot on our list. Modernization is not just about acquiring new ships, it's about learning from the last generation and building something better. That is exactly what BRP Diego Salong represents. Commissioned in December 2025, Diego Salong is part of the new Miguel Malvar-class, the most advanced class of warships ever acquired by the Philippine Navy. Compared to the Jose Rizal class, the improvements are significant. The ship carries a larger missile load, a more advanced combat management system, an AESA radar capable of tracking multiple threats simultaneously, and improved electronic warfare systems. But the biggest difference is air defense. For years, one of the most discussed limitations of the Jose Rizal class was its unfilled vertical launch system. Diego Salong was designed to address that gap, introducing the Philippines' first true shipborne vertical launch air defense capability. That changes how the fleet can operate. A ship that can defend itself is valuable. A ship that can help defend an entire task group is a force multiplier. The frigate also carries anti-submarine weapons, a close-in weapon system for last-ditch defense, and a larger anti-ship missile load than its predecessors. Taken together, these upgrades make Diego Salong far more than an improved Jose Rizal. It is a new generation of warship, a ship designed for the realities of modern naval warfare in the Indo-Pacific. That combination of firepower, survivability, and future growth potential earns BRP Diego Salong the number 4 spot on our list.
Upon joining the active fleet, the 2nd Miguel Malvar-class frigate will enhance the Philippine Navy's operational readiness, maritime domain protection, and capability to uphold a free, secure, and rules-based international order.
Every modernization program has a defining moment. For the Philippine Navy, one of those moments came in May 2025 with the commissioning of BRP Miguel Malvar. As the lead ship of the Miguel Malvar class, it represented far more than the arrival of a new frigate. It signaled that the Navy had entered a new phase of modernization, a phase focused not just on acquiring modern ships, but on building a modern fleet.
During the commissioning ceremony of the Navy's 2 newly acquired vessels, the BRP Miguel Malvar and the BRP Albert Mahining, is a Philippine Navy that is modernizing, that is evolving, and is ready to conduct more complex and effective operations in promoting the country's national interest.
The lessons learned from the Jose Rizal class are visible throughout the design. The ship is larger, more capable, and built with greater room for future upgrades. It carries advanced anti-ship missiles, anti-submarine weapons, modern electronic warfare systems, and a significantly more sophisticated combat architecture than the fleet possessed just a few years earlier. But Miguel Malvar's importance goes beyond hardware. Its arrival doubled the number of missile-armed major surface combatants in Philippine service from 2 to 4 within a single year. That may seem like a simple statistic. In reality, it marked one of the most significant expansions of Philippine naval combat power in decades. The ship also reflects a broader shift in strategy. The goal is no longer simply maritime presence. The goal is credible deterrence, to defend national interests, to operate effectively alongside allies, and to navigate an increasingly complex security environment in the South China Sea and wider Indo-Pacific. That is why BRP Miguel Malvar ranks above every individual ship we've discussed so far. But as important as Miguel Malvar is, modern warships do not fight alone. And that brings us to number 2. So far, we've ranked individual ships. But modern navies don't fight that way. Warships operate as teams, sharing information, covering each other's weaknesses, and combining their capabilities into something far more powerful than a single vessel. That's why the Jose Rizal class takes the number 2 spot. Together, BRP Jose Rizal and BRP Antonio Luna became the foundation of Philippine naval combat power throughout the first half of the 2020s. They were the Navy's first modern guided missile frigates. The first ships capable of combining anti-ship warfare, anti-submarine warfare, helicopter operations, and modern battlefield awareness into a single combat system. More importantly, they were the ships that turned modernization into operational experience. Since entering service, the 2 frigates have participated in major exercises such as Rimpak and Balikatan, helping Filipino sailors develop the doctrine, tactics, and confidence needed to operate modern warships. That experience matters. Technology can be purchased. Operational expertise cannot. By 2026, the Jose Rizal class had accumulated thousands of hours at sea, becoming the fleet's most experienced missile combatants. Together, they provide overlapping sensor coverage, anti-ship strike capability, anti-submarine warfare assets, and the ability to operate AW-159 Wildcat helicopters. For years, they were the face of Philippine naval modernization. Of course, the class still has limitations. The long-discussed vertical launch air defense capability remains unrealized, preventing the ships from reaching their full potential. But impact matters just as much as hardware. And no ships have had a greater impact on how the modern Philippine Navy trains, operates, and fights. That is why the Jose Rizal class ranks second. Not because it is the most advanced force in the fleet, but because it became the foundation upon which the modern fleet was built. Yet there is one class of ships that represents the future more clearly than any other. A class built with the lessons of the Jose Rizal program in mind. A class designed from the beginning for modern multi-domain warfare. And a class that now stands at the very tip of the Philippine Navy's spear. Every ship on this list tells part of the Philippine Navy's modernization story. The Miguel Malvar class is where that story leads. Commissioned in 2025, BRP Miguel Malvar and BRP Diego Salong are the most capable warships ever acquired by the Philippine Navy. They represent more than a decade of lessons learned since the Scarborough Shoal crisis of 2012. A crisis that exposed the limits of an under-equipped fleet and accelerated the push for modernization. Together, these frigates combine the widest range of capabilities ever placed aboard Philippine warships. They carry larger anti-ship missile loads than the Jose Rizal class, advanced anti-submarine warfare systems, modern electronic warfare suites, AESA radar technology, and, most importantly, the Philippines' first true shipborne vertical launch air defense capability. That changes how the fleet can operate. A warship that can defend itself is valuable. A warship that can help protect an entire task group is transformative. But the significance of the Miguel Malvar class extends beyond technology. These ships were built for the realities of the Indo-Pacific, an environment shaped by growing naval competition, maritime disputes, and the need for closer cooperation with allies and partners. The goal was never to match larger navies ship for ship. The goal was deterrence, to raise the cost of aggression, to strengthen maritime security, and to provide the Philippines with a more credible naval presence in contested waters. That is why the Miguel Malvar class ranks number 1. Not because it is the largest class in the fleet, not because it is invincible, but because it represents the current peak of Philippine naval capability and the clearest vision of where the Navy is headed next. These ships are not the end of modernization. They are the beginning of its next chapter, the tip of the spear. From BRP Davao del Sur's ability to move troops and supplies across thousands of islands to the air defense capabilities of the Miguel Malvar class, every ship on this list serves a different purpose. Some provide presence, some provide mobility, some provide deterrence. But together, they reveal something much bigger. Because this ranking was never really about individual ships. It's about how a navy transformed itself. A navy that once relied on aging patrol vessels now operates modern missile frigates, advanced patrol ships, anti-submarine helicopters, and one of the most capable surface fleets in its modern history. And that transformation is still underway. When you look at these 10 ships individually, it's easy to focus on the missiles, radars, and technology. But the real story isn't about ships. It's about transformation. If you like the video, do not forget to share it with your friends, like it, and subscribe Indo-Pacific Report for the latest geopolitics and defense analysis.
In the vicinity of Second Thomas Shoal and observing all activities between Filipino.
What does it say about a country's future at sea when its navy stops buying hand-me-downs and starts commissioning brand new warships by the dozen? For the Philippines, the answer is clear. It signals a decisive break from decades of naval vulnerability and the beginning of a serious maritime power transition. With South Korea set to deliver 12 modern warships, Manila is no longer just talking about naval modernization. It is executing it, ship by ship, hull by hull. This moment did not arrive overnight. For years, the Philippine Navy operated aging vessels acquired secondhand from allies, platforms designed for constabulary roles rather than high-end maritime deterrence. The difference today is stark. South Korea's HD Hyundai Heavy Industries is delivering new-build frigates and offshore patrol vessels, equipped with modern sensors, combat management systems, and endurance suitable for extended operations in contested waters. It is the difference between patching an old car to keep it running and driving a factory-fresh vehicle built for the highway ahead. As one defense expert put it bluntly, shifting from second-hand to new ships is essential in any modern navy. Regionally, this upgrade places the Philippines on a new comparative footing. Vietnam began its naval leap with Russian-built Kilo-class submarines. Indonesia invested early in South Korean shipbuilding partnerships of its own. Even Malaysia has steadily expanded its surface fleet with modern designs. For years, Manila lagged behind, strategically exposed despite sitting at the center of vital sea lanes. The South Korea-Philippines shipbuilding partnership now closes that gap. While the Philippine Navy will not match its neighbors ship for ship, it is finally moving into the same technological generation, which matters far more in modern maritime warfare. The strategic implications extend beyond national pride or fleet numbers. 12 new warships dramatically expand the Philippines' blue water reach, patrol persistence, and ability to operate alongside allies in the West Philippine Sea and wider Indo-Pacific. At a time when maritime tensions are rising and naval power is the currency of credibility, South Korea's deliveries are not just steel and electronics, they are strategic reassurance. In the Indo-Pacific's unfolding naval competition, the Philippines is no longer watching from the sidelines. It is finally showing up to the fight with ships built for the future. For decades, the Philippine Navy's operational reality lagged far behind its strategic geography. Despite sitting astride some of the world's most contested and commercially vital sea lanes, the fleet was largely composed of aging patrol craft and legacy vessels optimized for coastal security rather than modern naval warfare. Many platforms in service well into the 2000s were already decades old, with limited sensors, minimal air defense capability, and little capacity to operate for extended periods at sea. As one former Philippine Navy flag officer candidly admitted, "For a long time our ships could sail, but they could not fight." The mismatch between missions and capabilities became increasingly untenable. The Philippines is responsible for an exclusive economic zone covering approximately 2.2 million square kilometers, one of the largest maritime jurisdictions in Southeast Asia. Yet for years, the Navy lacked sufficient hull numbers, endurance, and maritime domain awareness to police it effectively. Persistent challenges range from territorial disputes in the West Philippine Sea, particularly involving overlapping claims with China, to chronic non-traditional security threats such as illegal fishing, fuel smuggling, piracy, and transnational crime. According to Philippine government estimates, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing alone costs the country tens of billions of pesos annually, directly undermining food security and coastal livelihoods. Beyond security enforcement, the Navy also carries an outsized humanitarian burden. The Philippines experiences an average of 20 tropical cyclones per year, several of them severe, alongside frequent earthquakes and maritime emergencies. Naval assets are often the first and last responders, delivering relief supplies, evacuating civilians, and restoring access to isolated islands. However, limited sealift capacity and aging hulls constrained response speed and sustainability. As the Department of National Defense has repeatedly emphasized, disaster response is not a secondary mission for the Philippine Navy, it is a core operational requirement. These cumulative pressures gave rise to a fundamental reassessment of naval force structure under the horizon phases of the Armed Forces of the Philippines modernization program. Rather than simply replacing old ships one for one, the objective shifted toward building a credible, multi-mission navy capable of peacetime constabulary operations, disaster response, and critically, credible deterrence against peer and near-peer naval forces. The emphasis on new-build combatants with modern sensors, command and control systems, and interoperability with allies reflects a strategic understanding that maritime security today is inseparable from national sovereignty. In this context, naval modernization is no longer framed as a luxury or prestige project, but as a strategic necessity. As one senior defense official summarized the shift, "You cannot defend an archipelago with ships designed only to patrol it. You need platforms that can stay at sea, see farther, and operate with partners." The Philippines' turn toward modern frigates and offshore patrol vessels is thus not merely about filling gaps. It is about aligning naval power with the realities of a contested maritime environment in the Indo-Pacific. South Korea's emergence as a key defense partner to the Philippines reflects a much broader transformation in Seoul's global posture, from a once inward-focused arms producer to a confident, outward-looking defense exporter competing with long-established European and US firms. Over the past decade, South Korea has rapidly climbed into the ranks of the world's top arms exporters, with Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI, data consistently placing it among the top 10 global defense exporters. Naval shipbuilding in particular has become one of Seoul's strongest calling cards, combining advanced technology, competitive pricing, and on-time delivery, an area where even traditional Western yards have struggled. At the center of this rise is HD Hyundai Heavy Industries, HHI, one of the largest shipbuilders in the world by tonnage, and a cornerstone of South Korea's defense industrial base. HHI's portfolio spans everything from commercial supertankers to advanced naval combatants, giving it a scale advantage few competitors can match. For Manila, this mattered. HHI did not merely offer ships, it offered a full package: new-build warships, integrated combat systems, training pipelines, and long-term sustainment support. As a Philippine defense official noted during one contract signing, "Korea offered modern ships that met our requirements, within our budget, and on a timeline we could trust." In an era where delays and cost overruns plague defense procurement globally, that reliability proved decisive. Seoul's motivations extend beyond commercial gain. Strategically, South Korea views defense partnerships in Southeast Asia as a means of deepening ties with ASEAN states, while quietly reinforcing a rules-based maritime order. Although not a claimant in the South China Sea, South Korea is a major trading nation whose energy supplies and exports transit these waters. Stability, freedom of navigation, and predictable maritime norms are therefore not abstract principles for Seoul. They are core national interests. By enabling partners like the Philippines to better patrol and defend their maritime domains, South Korea strengthens regional resilience without deploying its own forces or provoking overt escalation. Equally important is industrial logic. Defense exports allow South Korea to sustain production lines, spread research and development costs, and continuously upgrade its platforms through operational feedback from overseas users. Follow-on support, upgrades, and future acquisitions create long-term defense relationships rather than one-off sales. As South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol stated in outlining Seoul's defense export strategy, arms cooperation today is about partnership, not transactions. The Philippine Navy's growing fleet of Korean-built vessels exemplifies this model, binding both countries into a durable strategic and industrial relationship. South Korea's role in Philippine naval modernization is emblematic of a larger shift in the Indo-Pacific defense market. Where Southeast Asian states once depended almost exclusively on Western suppliers, they now have credible alternatives that combine quality, affordability, and strategic alignment. For Manila, South Korea is not simply a shipbuilder, it is a strategic enabler. And for Seoul, the Philippines is not just a customer, but proof that South Korea has arrived as a serious global defense partner. The significance of the 12 warships delivered by South Korea lies not just in their number, but in what they represent collectively. A layered, modern surface fleet built for real-world missions rather than symbolic presence. For the first time in its history, the Philippine Navy is fielding a coherent mix of frigates and offshore patrol vessels designed from the keel up for blue water operations, maritime security, and sustained presence in contested waters. Each class plays a distinct role, but together they form the backbone of a modern naval force. The foundation of this transformation was laid by the Rizal-class frigates, the first true modern combatants acquired by the Philippines. When they entered service earlier in the modernization program, they immediately reset expectations of what the Philippine Navy could do at sea. Equipped with modern radar systems, combat management software, and guided missile capability, these ships enabled longer deployments, better situational awareness, and credible participation in multinational naval exercises. More importantly, they established a baseline, demonstrating that the Philippines could operate and sustain complex warships, not just patrol craft. Building on that foundation, the Miguel Malvar-class frigates represent a qualitative leap forward. The lead ship, BRP Miguel Malvar, FFG-06, was delivered in April 2025 and subsequently commissioned into active service, followed by BRP Diego Silang, FFG-07, commissioned on 2 December 2025. Displacing roughly 3,200 tons, these frigates are significantly more capable than their predecessors. Their defining feature is the inclusion of a vertical launch system, VLS, allowing the deployment of surface-to-air missiles alongside anti-ship and anti-submarine weapons. In practical terms, this gives the Philippine Navy something it previously lacked: layered air defense and the ability to protect not just itself, but nearby vessels during operations. As one naval analyst observed, a VLS-equipped frigate changes how a Navy thinks about survivability. It stops being reactive and starts shaping the battle space. Complementing the high-end combatants are the Raja Suleiman-class offshore patrol vessels, OPVs, 6 of which are being built based on the HDP 2200+ design. The arrival of the lead ship, BRP Raja Suleiman, PS-20, in early 2026, escorted symbolically by BRP Jose Rizal, showed how these vessels fit into the wider fleet architecture. At around 2,400 tons, these OPVs are optimized for endurance rather than heavy combat. They are tailored for EEZ patrols, maritime law enforcement, search and rescue, and disaster response, missions that dominate day-to-day naval operations in an archipelagic state. Their modular design allows for flexible payloads, making them ideal workhorses that free up frigates for higher-end deterrence tasks. Beyond the ships already delivered or in service, Manila has also committed to future sustainability. The Philippines is acquiring 2 additional frigates similar to the Miguel Malvar-class under a contract valued at approximately 34 billion pesos, around $585 million. This decision reflects a shift away from ad hoc procurement toward fleet commonality, simplifying training, logistics, and maintenance while extending operational reach. Rather than a one-off modernization burst, the Navy is clearly planning for continuity. These 12 warships mark a structural change in Philippine naval power. The fleet now has credible combatants, persistent patrol platforms, and a pathway for long-term sustainment. It is no longer a Navy built only to show the flag or respond after crises strike. It is increasingly a Navy designed to stay at sea, deter pressure, and operate alongside allies in a contested Indo-Pacific maritime environment. The arrival of modern guided missile frigates alongside long-range patrol vessels fundamentally alters how the Philippine Navy shows up at sea. Where presence once meant brief patrols close to shore, it now means sustained visibility across territorial waters, the exclusive economic zone, and critical approaches beyond it. Frigates provide the deterrent edge, armed, sensor-rich, and survivable, while offshore patrol vessels ensure persistence, freeing high-end combatants from routine constabulary duties. Together, they allow Manila to maintain a credible maritime posture without exhausting its most capable assets. Presence, in this sense, becomes continuous rather than symbolic. Deterrence follows naturally from this shift. Modern warships do not need to fire a shot to change behavior. Their very deployment alters risk calculations. The ability to operate farther from home ports, remain on station longer, and defend themselves against air and surface threats complicates any attempt to coerce or intimidate Philippine forces at sea. As one regional security analyst noted, deterrence is not about matching an adversary ship for ship, it's about making harassment costly and escalation uncertain. The Philippine Navy's new fleet does precisely that, reinforcing sovereignty claims through capability rather than rhetoric.
The vicinity immediately. Over. Chinese warship 629, Chinese warship 629. This is Philippine Navy warship 16.
Equally important is the improvement in interoperability with allied navies. The new ships are equipped with modern combat management systems, standardized communications, and NATO-compatible procedures, enabling seamless participation in joint patrols, exercises, and maritime security operations with partners such as the United States, Japan, Australia, and South Korea. This matters strategically. In today's Indo-Pacific, deterrence is increasingly collective, and navies that cannot plug into allied networks risk operating in isolation. The Philippine Navy's modernization ensures it is not merely present, but connected. Beyond hardware, the strategic impact runs deep into the institution itself. Introducing advanced sensors, missile systems, and integrated command and control architectures forces changes in training, doctrine, and professional specialization. Sailors and officers must now master air defense coordination, anti-submarine warfare, electronic warfare, and networked operations, skills that define modern naval professionalism. This drives a shift away from generalist seamanship towards specialized career tracks, raising overall force competence and retention. Over time, these professional and technological advancements compound. New doctrines emerge, maintenance cultures mature, and operational confidence grows. The Navy moves from reacting to events towards shaping the maritime environment. In strategic terms, this is the most durable impact of modernization. Not just better ships today, but a force increasingly capable of learning, adapting, and sustaining maritime power in the long run. The modernization of the Philippine Navy carries implications that extend well beyond national waters. A more capable Philippine fleet strengthens the broader, rules-based maritime order that underpins stability in the Indo-Pacific, particularly in heavily trafficked and contested sea lanes. By improving its ability to patrol, monitor, and remain present in the West Philippine Sea, Manila reinforces the principle that maritime disputes should be managed through law, norms, and sustained presence rather than coercion. In this sense, naval capability becomes a stabilizing force, not because it seeks confrontation, but because it raises the threshold for unilateral pressure. These developments also align closely with the security objectives of ASEAN states and extra-regional partners that champion freedom of navigation and overflight. The Philippine Navy's expanding role in joint exercises, workshops, and operational engagements with the United States, Japan, Australia, and other partners enhances collective maritime awareness and crisis management. Rather than acting as a frontline escalator, the Philippines increasingly functions as a capable node within a wider security network, helping preserve strategic balance at a time when regional tensions are rising, but still manageable through cooperation. Beyond strategy, the warship program has become a pillar of defense diplomacy between Seoul and Manila. What began as procurement has evolved into a deeper, institutional relationship encompassing training, sustainment, and long-term industrial cooperation. For South Korea, the Philippines represents a reliable partner that validates its defense export model. For Manila, South Korea offers not just hardware, but a pathway to professionalization and industrial learning. The potential for technology transfer, logistics cooperation, and local sustainment infrastructure carries meaningful economic implications. HD Hyundai Heavy Industries has supported maintenance and logistics operations and established support mechanisms that point toward long-term presence rather than transactional sales. Over time, this opens space for skills development, local employment, and integration into regional defense supply chains. In an era where defense spending is increasingly scrutinized, these secondary economic benefits help justify modernization as an investment rather than a sunk cost. Modern ships, however, bring modern demands. Operating sophisticated combat systems requires a parallel expansion in training pipelines, manpower development, and technical specialization. The Philippine Navy must scale its human capital to ensure that advanced platforms are not merely operational, but fully exploited. This includes retaining skilled personnel in a competitive labor market where technical expertise is highly transferable. Budgetary pressures remain another constraint. Acquisition is only the first step. Sustainment, midlife upgrades, and integration with evolving command and control networks demand predictable funding over decades. Integrating new Korean-built platforms with legacy systems also poses logistical and doctrinal challenges, requiring careful alignment across procurement, maintenance, and operational concepts. These are not failures of modernization, but predictable friction points that will determine its long-term success. Looking ahead, the arrival of these warships is reshaping how the Philippine Navy thinks about doctrine, deterrence, and national defense. The emphasis is shifting toward credible, defensive maritime power, focused on presence, survivability, and alliance interoperability, rather than numerical parity with larger navies. This doctrinal evolution reflects a mature understanding of the Philippines' strategic environment and resource constraints. Importantly, the modernization trajectory does not appear to be stopping at surface combatants. Ongoing discussions around submarine capabilities, enhanced maritime surveillance, and further fleet expansion suggest a long-term vision for Philippine maritime power. In this future, South Korea is well-positioned to remain a central partner, whether through additional shipbuilding, systems integration, or sustainment support. The delivery of 12 warships from South Korea to the Philippine Navy stands as a milestone in both capability transformation and defense cooperation. It marks the Philippines' transition from a fleet constrained by age and scarcity to one increasingly defined by endurance, professionalism, and strategic relevance. At the same time, it shows South Korea's emergence as a trusted defense partner capable of shaping regional security outcomes through industry, diplomacy, and long-term engagement. More than a procurement success, this partnership reflects a shared commitment to maritime security, stability, and peace in the Indo-Pacific. In a region where naval power often signals intent, the Philippines and South Korea have chosen a path that strengthens deterrence while reinforcing cooperation. That balance between readiness and restraint may prove to be the most important capability of all. If you found this analysis valuable, share your perspective in the comments. Your insights help deepen the conversation and sharpen our understanding of evolving regional dynamics. Thank you, and we will see you soon in our next geopolitical discussion.
We have also agreed to sustain, if not further, the visits and cooperation between the French Navy and the Philippine Navy.
The size of China's displacement of the world balance is such that the world must find a new equilibrium, Lee Kuan Yew once warned. Reminding smaller states that survival in a shifting order depends not on size, but on foresight and strong partnerships. That logic now plays out clearly in the Philippines' push for its first defense pact with a European power, unfolding at the Paris Defense and Strategy Forum in March 2026. As Manila moves toward finalizing a status of visiting forces agreement with France, following months of expanded joint drills, including the 2025 deployment of the French carrier Charles de Gaulle, this step signals more than routine diplomacy. It reflects a country adjusting to a harder reality at sea, widening its circle of deterrence beyond traditional partners as sustained pressure in the West Philippine Sea reshapes its strategic choices. To understand why this moment matters, one must look beyond the headlines into the geography that exposes the Philippines, the alliances it is steadily building, the pressure that drives these choices, and the wider return of global powers into Indo-Pacific waters. Each of these layers tells part of the story, and together they explain how a single agreement in Paris fits into a much larger shift now unfolding across the region. Let's begin our discussion. Great powers seek partners when the balance of power begins to shift against them, John Mearsheimer once observed, capturing a truth that echoes far beyond major powers alone. That logic now finds relevance in Southeast Asia, where the Philippines' push for its first defense pact with France at the Paris Defense and Strategy Forum in March 2026 reflects more than routine diplomacy. It reflects pressure accumulated over years, tensions at sea, repeated confrontations in contested waters, and the growing realization that security in the Indo-Pacific is no longer a temporary challenge, but a permanent condition. The proposed status of visiting forces agreement with France is not just legal paperwork, it is the mechanism that turns partnership into presence, allowing structured training, coordinated deployments, and sustained operational cooperation. What makes this moment stand out is timing and momentum working together. French naval deployments, including the 2025 operations of the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle alongside Philippine forces, have already shown that Europe is no longer a distant observer of Asian tensions. Step by step, Manila has widened its circle of partners, building a layered network rather than relying on a single shield. Seen in this light, the Paris Initiative becomes more than a bilateral move. It becomes the opening scene of a larger story. One where the Philippines is learning that survival in contested waters depends not on isolation, but on carefully built connections that stretch far beyond its immediate horizon. Geopolitics at its core begins with the map. As Robert D. Kaplan often reminds readers, geography does not argue, it simply sits there, shaping decisions whether leaders like it or not. The Philippines is a perfect example of this quiet but relentless force. Stretching across more than 7,600 islands, the country sits on the eastern rim of the South China Sea, facing waters that carry nearly 1/3 of global maritime trade every year. These are not empty seas. They are crowded highways of oil tankers, cargo vessels, and naval patrols. Beneath those same waters lie rich fishing grounds that feed millions and energy deposits long believed to hold significant gas reserves. That is the blessing. The exposure, however, lies in the same geography. Places like Second Thomas Shoal and Scarborough Shoal are not distant dots on a chart. They sit along key approaches that shape movement across the wider region. Over the past year, repeated confrontations near these areas, water cannon incidents, blocking maneuvers, and prolonged shadowing have turned geography into daily pressure rather than distant theory. Look closely at the Philippine map, and the challenge becomes obvious. Its islands form long, broken chains rather than a single solid landmass. Supply ships traveling to remote outposts must cross open water, often through narrow approaches that are easy to monitor and difficult to secure alone. Even northern Luzon, facing Taiwan across the Bashi Channel, sits near one of the most sensitive maritime corridors in Asia, a passage used by naval forces moving between the Pacific Ocean and the South China Sea. This is why geography leaves Manila little room for complacency. The country cannot move its islands, cannot shorten its coastlines, and cannot close the sea around it. What it can do is reinforce these waters with presence. That is why joint patrols, surveillance flights, and multinational naval exercises have increased in recent years, particularly around the northern and western approaches. In strategic terms, the West Philippine Sea has become more than a territorial question. It has become the center of gravity for national security planning. Every new partnership, every visiting force agreement, every expanded exercise ultimately traces back to the same reality: the shape of the map. Pressure begins in these waters, and so the response must begin there as well. Geography, as history has shown time and again, sets the stage long before strategy enters the room. Diplomats often say that alliances are not built in calm waters. They are built when pressure begins to rise. Philippine defense leaders have echoed a similar line in recent years. Security today is no longer about standing beside one partner, but about standing within a network. That shift is now visible. The Philippines is no longer building its defense posture around a single pillar. It is practicing what strategists call external balancing, a simple but powerful idea in security policy. Spread the risk, build layers, make deterrence collective. The United States remains the anchor under the Mutual Defense Treaty, but the web has widened. Japan has stepped in with coastal radar systems and patrol vessels. Australia has expanded rotational training and joint maritime drills. Canada and New Zealand have joined multilateral patrols that were once limited to a much smaller group. What used to be bilateral security is slowly turning into network deterrence. This widening web became clearer during 2024 and 2025 when joint maritime patrols in the West Philippine Sea began to include several partners operating together. These were not symbolic sail-throughs. They were presence operations, meant to show coordination, improve interoperability, and reinforce maritime domain awareness, terms often used in naval planning, but rooted in simple logic. Ships that train together respond faster under pressure. France enters this picture as a new and important link. For the first time, Manila is reaching beyond its Pacific Circle and drawing in a European partner with real naval capability. French participation in joint drills, carrier deployments, and future visiting forces arrangements signals a shift in mindset. The Philippines is no longer building isolated alliances, it is building layers of reassurance. Each new partner adds depth to the security web, widening the strategic space around the country. France's role in Philippine security planning is not accidental, and it is definitely not symbolic. Many people still see France as a distant European power, but the map tells a different story. France is an Indo-Pacific nation by geography, not just by policy. Its territories in New Caledonia and French Polynesia place French citizens and large maritime zones directly inside the Indo-Pacific, giving Paris a reason to stay present, not just interested. That presence is now becoming more visible. Over the past few years, French naval deployments, including missions led by the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle, have moved repeatedly through Southeast Asian waters, signaling that France intends to remain a steady actor in this region, not a temporary visitor. But strategy is not only about ships sailing, it is also about capacity being built. In recent years, France has quietly backed some of the Philippines' most practical maritime upgrades. One of the clearest examples is the patrol boat program now underway between Manila and Paris. Philippine Coast Guard signed a deal worth about $25.8 billion, or roughly $438 million, for 40 fast patrol boats from French shipbuilder OSHA, with first deliveries expected to begin in 2026. These vessels are not small symbolic assets. They are designed for surveillance, law enforcement, and rapid response missions across Philippine waters. Even more important, 20 of the 40 boats are planned to be built locally in the Philippines, allowing technology transfer and long-term maintenance support. For Manila, France brings something different from its traditional partners, a European power that combines diplomacy, naval reach, and industrial capability. And across Europe, a similar pattern is emerging. Stability in the Indo-Pacific is now seen as tied directly to global trade and energy security, especially since a large share of European commerce depends on sea routes that pass through Asian waters. In that sense, France's growing engagement is part of a wider return of European maritime thinking after decades of relative distance. On paper, a status of visiting forces agreement, what strategists call a SOVFA, can look dry and technical. Just legal language, rules, and procedures. But in real-world security, these agreements often decide whether ships can dock, aircraft can land, or troops can train when it matters most. Without them, even friendly forces move slowly, tied down by legal uncertainty. With them, cooperation becomes routine. That is why the negotiations between Manila and Paris, completed in late 2025 and now moving toward formal adoption, matter far more than they appear at first glance. They create the legal doorway that allows forces to operate smoothly inside each other's territory, turning friendship into function. There is a reason the Philippines has relied heavily on similar agreements with partners like the United States and Australia. Those frameworks made possible some of the largest recent exercises across Philippine territory, including operations in northern Luzon, where forces now train near sea lanes facing Taiwan, and along the western coastline overlooking the West Philippine Sea. These drills are not small events anymore. In recent years, multinational exercises have involved thousands of troops, dozens of aircraft, and coordinated naval formations, all moving under shared legal protections that make planning predictable. A French SOFA would extend this same logic to European forces, allowing French ships, surveillance aircraft, and amphibious units to train repeatedly rather than visit only once. The real power of a SOFA lies in what it quietly changes behind the scenes. Diplomacy builds trust, but legal frameworks build readiness. They answer practical questions. Who has jurisdiction? Where can forces deploy? How fast can help arrive? These details rarely make headlines, yet they shape the speed of response during crisis. If finalized, the SOFA between France and the Philippines will do more than add another partner. It will give that partnership structure, rhythm, and staying power. Agreements on paper mean little until ships begin to move. That is where the story naturally continues from legal frameworks to real activity at sea. In 2025, the French carrier strike group led by the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle sailed into waters near northern Luzon and trained alongside Philippine forces. It was not a quiet port visit. Fighter aircraft launched sorties, ships maneuvered in formation, and communication drills tested how quickly two distant militaries could speak the same operational language. Later that same year, French vessels, including surveillance frigates, joined exercises off Mindanao, showing that the cooperation was not a one-time display, but part of a growing pattern. These were not symbolic moves. They were signals, visible to anyone watching the region closely. In naval strategy, presence itself becomes a message. When large warships operate together in contested waters, they communicate readiness without firing a shot. For Manila, hosting advanced platforms from carrier groups to amphibious ships strengthens what planners call maritime domain awareness and forward presence. Two key ideas in modern naval doctrine. For France, repeated deployments show that its Indo-Pacific role is not theoretical but operational. Recent multinational exercises in Philippine waters have grown steadily in size, with thousands of troops and multiple naval and air assets participating, especially in recurring drills like Balikatan, which has expanded significantly in scale since 2023. Each exercise adds familiarity. Each maneuver reduces hesitation. But the real power behind these drills lies in something less visible: interoperability. Modern deterrence is no longer about counting ships alone. It is about whether forces from different countries can function as one when pressure rises. That is why recent exercises have focused heavily on shared command procedures, synchronized communications, and coordinated response drills. In practical terms, this means aircraft from one country can receive guidance from another, ships can share targeting information, and rescue or defense missions can unfold without confusion. These are not ceremonial exercises. They are operational rehearsals meant to prepare for worst-case scenarios that leaders hope will never come. For the Philippines, this approach offers a quiet advantage. Instead of trying to build a massive fleet overnight, a costly and slow process, it strengthens capability through cooperation. A smaller navy linked to capable partners becomes more resilient than its size suggests. This is how deterrence grows today, not through isolated strength, but through connected strength. Every alliance has a story behind it, and in this case, the quiet force shaping Manila's choices is hard to miss. China is rarely named directly in every agreement, yet its actions sit in the background of nearly all recent Philippine security decisions. Over the past few years, the pattern has become too consistent to ignore. Philippine resupply missions to Second Thomas Shoal have repeatedly faced obstruction, including water cannon attacks in 2023 and 2024 that damaged vessels and injured crew members. By 2025 and into early 2026, Chinese Coast Guard and maritime militia presence around contested features had grown more regular, not occasional. In some areas, dozens of Chinese vessels have been recorded operating near Philippine-held positions at the same time. Turning routine supply runs into tense standoffs rather than logistical tasks. What once looked like isolated encounters now appears as a steady method, pressure applied slowly, persistently, and in full view. This pattern has forced a shift in Manila's thinking. Philippine defense planners are no longer reacting to single incidents, they are responding to what looks like a sustained campaign of maritime pressure. Surveillance patrols have increased. Joint maritime operations with partners have expanded. Intelligence sharing, what military planners call maritime domain awareness, has become more important than ever. The reasoning is defensive, not provocative. When pressure repeats itself often enough, doing nothing becomes riskier than building new partnerships. In this environment, cooperation is not about signaling aggression, it is about reducing exposure. The Philippines is not moving outward because it wants confrontation. It is doing so because geography and repeated incidents have narrowed its room to maneuver. China's growing naval and coast guard capacity adds another layer to this reality. Over the past decade, China has built what is now considered the largest coast guard fleet in the world, supported by maritime militia vessels that operate alongside regular forces. This expansion changes the balance at sea, not through direct conflict, but through constant presence. Agreements with France and other partners should be understood through this lens. They are not random diplomatic gestures or prestige projects. They are calculated responses to a shifting balance of power, responses shaped by repeated encounters at sea and the recognition that pressure, if left unanswered, tends to grow. Europe's renewed interest in the Indo-Pacific is no longer theoretical, it is visible at sea. France has taken the lead, but it is not alone. In recent years, several European navies have increased their deployments into Asian waters, conducting freedom of navigation missions, joint exercises, and port visits across Southeast Asia. These actions reflect a growing recognition that Europe's economic stability depends heavily on maritime trade routes that pass through the Indo-Pacific. Disruptions in these waters would not remain regional problems, they would ripple into European markets and industries. France's role stands out because of its sustained presence. With overseas territories and permanent forces stationed across the Indo-Pacific, Paris has both the legal authority and operational capability to act as a resident power. Its naval deployments over the past few years, including carrier-led missions and frigate patrols, have demonstrated continuity rather than occasional engagement. This steady rhythm of presence has made France a credible partner for countries like the Philippines seeking dependable external support. The broader European shift signals something deeper about global security trends. The Indo-Pacific is no longer seen as a distant theater, but as a central arena of strategic competition. As European states return to these waters, they bring with them new diplomatic weight and military capability. For Manila, this creates an opportunity to diversify its partnerships and widen its strategic horizon.
Philippine Coast Guard ay pinunduhan ng ating pamahalaan upang magkaroon ng dagdag na at least 56 ships in the next 5 years. By then, we may be considered as one of the strongest coast guards in Southeast Asia. Magiging legacy po yan ng ating Pangulo.
On a rough day in the West Philippine Sea, a Philippine government vessel can look very small. One boat, one crew, one mission. Then the pressure begins. Chinese Coast Guard ships appear on the horizon. Maritime militia vessels move into position. Radio warnings are exchanged. Water cannons come into play. What starts as a routine patrol quickly turns into a confrontation. This has become the reality of the West Philippine Sea, where maritime disputes are no longer fought only through diplomacy, but vessel by vessel, day after day. That is the real backdrop to the Philippine Coast Guard's plan to acquire at least 56 new vessels over the next 5 years. The Philippines faces an enormous challenge. More than 7,600 islands, a maritime domain covering roughly 2.2 million square kilometers, and growing pressure from Chinese Coast Guard and maritime militia vessels. Japan is funding additional large patrol ships, France is supplying dozens of fast patrol boats, and Manila is preparing for the largest Coast Guard expansion in its modern history. Because in today's South China Sea, presence is power, and the Philippines has decided it needs a lot more of it.
Unidentified foreign vessel at Scarborough Shoal. This is Philippine Coast Guard. BRP MRRV 4409.
August 2024. The Philippine Coast Guard vessel BRP Teresa Magbanua had spent months holding its position near Scarborough Shoal. Its crew was exhausted, supplies were running low, and Chinese vessels surrounded the area almost every day. Then came another confrontation. Chinese Coast Guard ships moved aggressively. Warnings were exchanged, and the pressure intensified. For many observers, it was just another incident in a long-running dispute. For Manila, it was a reminder of a much larger problem. The Philippines was trying to defend one of Asia's largest maritime domains with too few ships. That reality is why the Philippine Coast Guard is now preparing to acquire at least 56 new vessels over the next 5 years. Not because it wants a bigger fleet, but because it believes it needs one. The challenge is enormous. The Philippines has more than 7,600 islands, over 36,000 kilometers of coastline, and a maritime domain covering roughly 2.2 million square kilometers. Every day, it must monitor shipping lanes, fishing grounds, reefs, shoals, and remote islands spread across vast stretches of ocean. Meanwhile, pressure in the West Philippine Sea continues to grow. Chinese Coast Guard and maritime militia vessels maintain a constant presence in disputed waters, reinforcing a simple lesson. Presence matters. China understood this years ago, building a strategy around showing up every day and refusing to leave. Manila has now reached the same conclusion. If presence is power, then presence requires ships. Ships that can patrol, stay on station, protect fishermen, and represent the Philippine flag without escalating every encounter into a military crisis. That is why the number 56 matters. It is not just a procurement program. It is the result of years of lessons learned in the West Philippine Sea, where every standoff and every confrontation has pointed to the same answer. The Philippines needs more ships, more endurance, and more presence. When most people think about the struggle for the South China Sea, they imagine warships, submarines, and aircraft carriers. But that is not what is happening. The most important vessels in many of these confrontations are Coast Guard ships. Whether at Second Thomas Shoal, Scarborough Shoal, or Sabina Shoal, the encounters are usually between white ships, not gray ones. And that distinction matters. A warship signals military confrontation. A Coast Guard vessel signals law enforcement. It allows a country to apply pressure without crossing the line into open conflict. China understood this years ago and built its strategy around it. While much of the world focused on the rapid growth of the Chinese Navy, the China Coast Guard quietly became the largest Coast Guard service in the world. Its vessels patrol disputed waters, escort fishing fleets, block access to contested areas, and maintain a constant presence across the South China Sea. That strategy forced the Philippines to rethink its approach. Manila realized that the contest is not being won by the largest navy, but by the side that can maintain the strongest day-to-day presence. The side that arrives first, stays longest, and keeps showing up. As a result, the Philippine Coast Guard has become a frontline force, protecting fishermen, escorting missions, monitoring foreign vessels, and conducting sovereignty patrols across disputed waters. But presence requires numbers. One ship cannot be everywhere. That is why the planned acquisition of 56 vessels is so important. The goal is not to match China's Navy ship for ship. It is to build a fleet that can patrol more waters, respond to more incidents, and maintain a stronger Philippine presence at sea. Because in the South China Sea, influence often belongs not to the side that fires first, but to the side that refuses to leave.
Well, ano na ang estado ng West Philippine Sea? Ano na ang nagawa ng pamahalaan at saan tayo papunta? I'd like to start by laying the basic approach of the Coast Guard in the governance of the security situation over the West Philippine Sea.
Long before the Philippine Coast Guard announced plans for 56 new vessels, one ship had already become the symbol of the country's maritime struggle, the BRP Teresa Magbanua. For months, the vessel held its position near Sabina Shoal while larger and more numerous Chinese ships surrounded the area. Yet, it stayed. That is why Teresa Magbanua became a symbol. Not because it fired weapons or won a battle, but because it refused to leave. Every day it remained on station sent the same message: the Philippines was still there. As images of tense confrontations spread around the world, the ship became a powerful reminder that sovereignty is not defended by words alone, but by persistence under pressure. But one ship is not enough. No matter how capable it may be, it cannot patrol every reef, monitor every shoal, or respond to every incident. That reality explains why Japan has become a key partner in the Philippine Coast Guard's modernization effort. The Philippines is expected to receive 5 additional multi-role response vessels, giving the Coast Guard more ships capable of long deployments, law enforcement missions, search and rescue operations, and sovereignty patrols. The lesson of Teresa Magbanua is simple. In the South China Sea, strength is not measured only by firepower. It is measured by endurance and the ability to keep showing up. One ship became a symbol. The next 5 could turn that symbol into a strategy. And while these larger vessels will help hold the line, Manila is also preparing to acquire something equally important: smaller, faster ships designed to get there first. The BRP Teresa Magbanua taught the Philippines the value of endurance. Sometimes you need a ship that can stay on station for weeks and maintain a presence in contested waters. But maritime security presents another challenge. Trouble rarely arrives on schedule. A foreign vessel enters disputed waters. Fishermen report harassment. A distress call comes from a remote island. When that happens, speed becomes just as important as endurance. The first vessel to arrive gathers information, establishes presence, and often shapes the outcome. That is why the Philippine Coast Guard is investing not only in large offshore patrol vessels, but also in 40 fast patrol boats from France's Osha shipyard. These ships may attract less attention, but they could become some of the busiest vessels in the fleet. Think of the future Coast Guard as a team. The larger Japanese-backed vessels are built to stay at sea and hold the line, while the French patrol craft are built to respond quickly and reach trouble spots before situations escalate. For a country with more than 7,600 islands and vast stretches of ocean to patrol, that flexibility is essential. Together, these ships create a layered force where one provides endurance and the other provides speed. That is the real goal of modernization. The Philippines is not simply adding more ships, it is building a maritime security network capable of responding faster, covering more waters, and maintaining a stronger presence across its vast maritime domain. For years, the Philippines faced the same problem: too much sea and too few ships. Vast areas of coastline, fishing grounds, reefs, and disputed waters could not be watched all at once, creating gaps that could be exploited. That is why the planned acquisition of 56 vessels matters. It is not about the number itself, but about what it makes possible. Instead of concentrating a handful of ships around one crisis, the Coast Guard could maintain a presence across multiple regions at the same time. The Philippines becomes more visible, more responsive, and harder to ignore. And in maritime disputes, presence changes everything. But this expansion is about more than ships. The vessels will operate as part of a larger network that includes coastal radars, satellite surveillance, reconnaissance assets, and information sharing with allies. Together, they help reduce the blind spots that have existed for decades. China will still possess a larger Coast Guard and Navy, but that is not the point. The real goal is to make the Philippines harder to surprise, harder to intimidate, and better able to protect its waters. This fleet will prove its value not in a single dramatic confrontation, but in thousands of routine days at sea, protecting fishermen, responding to emergencies, and maintaining a constant Philippine presence where it matters most. If the first phase of the story was about surviving pressure, the next phase is about building staying power. By now, one question should be obvious. How can the Philippines launch one of the largest Coast Guard expansion programs in Southeast Asia? Ships are expensive to buy, maintain, and operate, and building a larger fleet requires trained crews, infrastructure, and long-term funding. The answer is that the Philippines is not doing it alone. Behind this modernization effort stands a growing network of partners that increasingly see the Philippines as a key frontline state in the Indo-Pacific. Japan has emerged as Manila's most important maritime partner, providing vessels, financing, training, and technical support. This is not simply an act of goodwill. Tokyo understands that stability in the South China Sea affects the security of East Asia, where major trade routes and energy supplies pass every day. A stronger Philippine Coast Guard therefore serves both Philippine and Japanese interests. At the same time, the United States has expanded intelligence sharing, joint exercises, and maritime cooperation, providing the kind of awareness and support that cannot always be seen, but often proves just as important as ships themselves.
Australian shift maybe a decade or two ago in saying that Australia's future is with Asia has really become a reality, and that's why the closeness between our countries, between Australia and the Philippines, is terribly important.
Australia has also increased maritime cooperation and defense engagement with Manila, while European countries are paying closer attention to the South China Sea than ever before. France, in particular, has become an important partner through both shipbuilding and broader Indo-Pacific cooperation. Together, these relationships create a powerful multiplier effect. A Philippine vessel operating alone is useful, but a vessel supported by satellite intelligence, radar networks, information sharing agreements, and allied cooperation becomes far more effective. That is the real story behind the fleet expansion. It is not happening in isolation, but within a larger security network taking shape across the Indo-Pacific. Yet there is one reality no partnership can change. Allies can help build ships, train crews, and improve awareness, but they cannot patrol Philippine waters every day. Ultimately, the responsibility still falls on the Philippines itself, and that means building the fleet is only the first step. Keeping it operational for years to come will be the real test. It is easy to get excited about new ships. Launch ceremonies make headlines. Procurement announcements make headlines. Fleet numbers make headlines. But ships sitting in a harbor do not protect a nation's waters. Operational ships do. And that is where the real challenge begins. Buying a fleet is one thing. Sustaining it is something entirely different. Every new vessel requires trained crews, fuel, maintenance, spare parts, upgraded infrastructure, and long-term funding. This is where many modernization programs around the world run into trouble. Governments buy ships, the vessels arrive, the cameras leave, and then reality begins. Can the fleet remain operational? Can enough personnel be recruited and retained? Can maintenance keep pace? Can funding remain consistent for decades? These questions matter because the Philippine Coast Guard is not adding a handful of vessels. It is planning to add at least 56. That is a transformation, and every transformation creates new demands. The challenge is even greater because the strategic environment is not standing still. While the Philippines expands its fleet, China continues expanding its own maritime presence through new Coast Guard vessels, regular patrols, and maritime militia operations.
Within the Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone, you are directed to depart immediately and notify us of your intention.
The pressure that drove this modernization effort is not going away. That means the Philippine Coast Guard must do more than grow. It must remain ready. Presence cannot be created for a few months and then forgotten. It must be sustained year after year. That is why this story is ultimately not about shipbuilding. It is about endurance, national endurance, financial endurance, and operational endurance. If the Philippines succeeds, it could field a Coast Guard capable of maintaining a truly nationwide maritime presence for the first time in its modern history. But that is also the real test. Because the hardest part of building a fleet is not launching the ships. The hardest part is making sure they are still sailing 10 years later. The ships are coming, the partnerships are growing, and the strategy is taking shape. But the real examination begins the moment those ships enter service. At the beginning of this story, we saw a familiar image, a lone Philippine Coast Guard vessel surrounded by larger ships in the contested waters of the West Philippine Sea. For years, that image captured the challenge facing the Philippines, a nation with thousands of islands, vast maritime responsibilities, and too few ships to maintain a constant presence across its waters. The BRP Teresa Magbanua became a symbol not because it won a battle, but because it stayed. It showed that in the South China Sea, presence matters. The side that shows up matters. The side that stays matters. And now, the Philippines is responding to that lesson not with aircraft carriers or a naval arms race, but with a larger and more capable Coast Guard. What happens when a distress call comes in at sea and help is hours away, not minutes? In a country made up of more than 7,600 islands, that question isn't hypothetical. It's life or death. And in 2026, the Philippine Coast Guard is making sure the answer changes. Quietly, without much noise outside defense circles, the PCG is in the middle of one of the most serious modernization pushes in its history. New vessels, better sensors, faster search and rescue platforms, smarter coordination. This isn't about looking powerful, it's about getting there in time, when a fishing boat capsizes, when a typhoon rips through coastal towns, when a tanker runs aground, or when foreign ships push too far into Philippine waters. For decades, the Coast Guard operated with limited hulls, stretched crews, and aging equipment, often asked to do too much with too little. Yet they kept showing up, pulling survivors from rough seas, evacuating families during storms, enforcing maritime law with patience rather than firepower. Now that burden is finally being matched with investment. This matters more than ever. Maritime traffic is heavier. The weather is harsher. Regional tensions are sharper. The sea around the Philippines is no longer just a livelihood. It's a pressure point. Faster response times, wider patrol coverage, and modern SAR systems aren't upgrades for comfort. They're necessities for a country whose borders are drawn in water. This piece breaks down how the Philippine Coast Guard's fleet expansion and SAR upgrades heading into 2026 are reshaping its ability to save lives, protect coastal communities, and quietly reinforce national security, not through intimidation, but through presence, readiness, and speed. Because in the end, maritime power isn't always about warships. Sometimes, it's about who reaches the scene first and who brings people home alive. The Philippine Coast Guard has always carried a heavy load, and not the flashy kind. It sits under the Department of Transportation, not the defense establishment, which already tells you something.
To include any traffic on this net and any unsafe work.
The PCG isn't built to fight wars. It's built to save lives, keep sea lanes safe, protect the environment, and enforce the law across one of the most complex maritime spaces on the planet. Search and rescue, oil spill response, vessel inspections, maritime security, day in, day out. Over the years, its role has quietly expanded. As regional waters grew more contested and disasters more frequent, the PCG became the first responder, the buffer, and sometimes the only visible Philippine presence at sea. That's a lot to ask of a civilian force. Right now, the PCG operates over 70 vessels, a mixed fleet of multi-role response vessels, patrol boats, and auxiliary craft. Some are modern, capable platforms. Others are aging workhorses that have been pushed far beyond their original design limits. They've done the job, but often at a cost, limited range, maintenance strain, and crews stretched thin on long deployments. Before 2026, those limits were especially obvious in places like the West Philippine Sea. PCG ships were asked to sail farther, stay longer, and operate under pressure, responding to foreign Coast Guard harassment, escorting Filipino fishers, and managing incidents in waters that are legally Philippine but physically contested. Presence mattered, but endurance and speed mattered just as much. Too often, the tools just weren't enough. And the pressure wasn't only geopolitical. Maritime incidents are rising across the board. Illegal fishing networks have grown bolder. Commercial traffic has intensified. Typhoons are stronger, less predictable, and deadlier. Climate change has turned routine rescue missions into race against time operations. Every delay costs lives. That's the context behind the current modernization push. A larger, more capable fleet isn't about flexing, it's about reach. Upgraded SAR systems aren't about tech for tech's sake. They're about shaving minutes off response times when minutes matter most. Together, these upgrades help the Philippines enforce its exclusive economic zone, protect its people at sea, and respond faster when disaster hits. In short, the PCG didn't modernize because it wanted to. It modernized because the sea got harder and standing still stopped being an option. This is where the modernization stops being abstract and starts looking real on the water. The Philippine Coast Guard isn't just talking about upgrades, it's adding hulls, and not the symbolic kind. These are vessels designed to move fast, stay out longer, and show up where the PCG used to struggle to reach. The headline addition is the 40 fast patrol boats based on France FPB 110MK II design. At roughly 35 meters long, these boats are built for one thing above all else: speed with endurance. Capable of pushing 28 to 35 knots, they can close distance fast, a critical advantage during search and rescue missions, maritime law enforcement, and intercept operations. Range matters just as much as speed. With an operational reach of up to 1,100 nautical miles, these boats extend the PCG's presence deep into far-flung maritime zones that were previously harder to cover without larger, slower ships. That means quicker response to distress calls, more persistent patrols, and less time lost just getting to the scene. The scale of the deal says a lot. Valued at roughly $400 million, it includes 9 years of maintenance support, a quiet but crucial detail. Sustainment, not just acquisition, has clearly become part of the planning. PCG Commandant Admiral Ronnie Gil Gavin summed it up bluntly. Acquiring these assets will modernize the PCG fleet, capacitating us to deploy mission-capable and high-speed vessels to further enhance maritime domain awareness. That line about awareness matters. Speed isn't just about chasing. It's about seeing, responding, and being present before situations spiral. Speed handles the near-term response. Endurance handles the long game. Alongside the fast patrol boats, the PCG is adding 97-meter multi-role response vessels, funded through Japan as part of a broader, long-running modernization partnership. These cutters are the backbone platforms, built to stay at sea, operate in rough conditions, and support missions far from shore. They bring staying power. Longer patrols, better command and control, more space for crews, medical response, and equipment. In contested waters, endurance equals credibility. If you can stay, you can assert. The planning doesn't stop there. The PCG is already evaluating next-generation offshore patrol vessels, potentially reaching 110 meters, equipped with advanced sensors, unmanned systems, and helicopter facilities. Nothing is finalized yet, but the direction is clear. More range, more eyes, and more flexibility. These would push the Coast Guard firmly into sustained blue water operations without crossing into a purely military posture. Strategically, this layered approach makes sense. Fast patrol boats handle rapid response and law enforcement. Large cutters handle presence and endurance. Together, they extend coverage across the Philippines' vast maritime zones and strengthen visibility in sensitive areas like the West Philippine Sea. Just as important, these new vessels aren't replacing the existing fleet, they're filling gaps. They supplement current multi-role ships and patrol boats, finally giving the PCG a balanced force capable of both speed and staying power. The procurement process itself tells a story. Funding comes from government allocations and intergovernmental financing agreements, mainly with France and Japan. And there's a domestic angle too. Half of the fast patrol boats will be built locally, transferring technology and skills to Philippine shipyards. That's not just fleet growth, that's industrial learning. These additions mark a shift. The PCG is moving from a force that reacts when it can to one that chooses when and where to act. And in a maritime nation like the Philippines, that's a serious upgrade. For the Philippine Coast Guard, search and rescue isn't a side mission, it's the mission people remember. It's the phone call in the middle of the night, the storm that turns faster than expected, the fishing boat that never came back on time. And heading into 2026, the PCG is quietly fixing the one thing that has always haunted maritime rescues in the Philippines. One of the biggest changes is happening behind the scenes. The PCG is upgrading navigation, tracking, and communication systems so units scattered across thousands of islands can coordinate faster and with fewer blind spots. In SAR operations, confusion kills momentum. These upgrades reduce that friction, allowing vessels, aircraft, and coastal stations to share information in real time, even in open waters far from shore. Alongside this, the Coast Guard is deploying high-speed response boats designed to operate in rough seas, poor visibility, and nighttime conditions. That matters more than it sounds. Most serious maritime accidents don't happen in calm daylight. They happen when the weather turns and options disappear. Speed plus survivability equals reach. Hardware alone doesn't save lives, people do. This is where Japan International Cooperation Agency support comes in. Under a 2025-2028 cooperation project, JICA will help elevate PCG training in search and rescue, maritime domain awareness, disaster response, and operational coordination. The focus isn't just drills, it's a system. Standard operating procedures, better investigation methods, stronger maritime traffic safety enforcement, even criminal investigation techniques tied to maritime incidents. These sound technical, but they shape how fast crews make decisions when pressure hits. Think of it this way. When every unit speaks the same operational language, hesitation disappears. That's how response times shrink. Put better equipment and sharper training together, and the payoff is simple, faster reactions to real emergencies. Typhoons, vessel collisions, oil spills, distress calls far offshore. The window between alert and arrival gets smaller, and in SAR, that window is everything. We've already seen hints of what this looks like in practice. PCG deployments near Scarborough Shoal, escorting and protecting Filipino fishing boats under pressure, show how improved readiness translates into real-time presence. The same coordination that keeps fishers safe under stress is what drives effective rescue when disaster strikes. The upgrades won't make every mission easy. The sea never is. But for the Philippine Coast Guard, 2026 marks a shift. From reacting late to arriving early, from hoping to reach the scene in time to planning for it. And that's how lives get saved. A stronger PCG fleet means fewer gaps, and gaps are exactly where illegal activity thrives. With faster patrol boats and longer range cutters, the Coast Guard is better positioned to deter illegal fishing, smuggling, and piracy, not just react after the fact. Speed allows interception. Endurance allows persistence. Together, they raise the cost of maritime crime. More importantly, sustained presence inside the exclusive economic zone reinforces Philippine rights under international law. You don't assert sovereignty with statements alone, you assert it by being there, consistently, lawfully, and visibly. When PCG ships patrol contested waters, they signal enforcement, not escalation. That distinction matters. For a country repeatedly hit by extreme weather, this may be the most immediate payoff. Faster boats, better coordination, and improved SAR training directly translate into quicker response during typhoons, floods, and maritime accidents. When storms like Typhoon Tino slam coastal communities, the difference between arrival in 2 hours versus 6 can decide who survives. The Coast Guard often becomes the backbone of early response, evacuations, relief delivery, medical transport. These upgrades mean the PCG can reach isolated islands sooner, operate in worse conditions, and stay on scene longer. That's humanitarian capacity, not just security. There's also a diplomatic layer. Partnerships with Japan, France, and JICA aren't just about equipment or training, they're about interoperability, shared procedures, compatible systems, common standards. Over time, this aligns the PCG with global maritime best practices, making joint operations smoother and trust easier. This matters in a region where cooperation often happens quietly, away from headlines. When disasters cross borders or maritime incidents involve multiple actors, alignment reduces friction. It turns coordination into reflex rather than negotiation. In the end, these upgrades do one thing exceptionally well. They make the Philippine Coast Guard more credible. Credible as a law enforcer. Credible as a first responder. Credible as a maritime presence. And in today's seas, credibility is power. The kind that stabilizes rather than provokes. Modernization only really matters when ordinary people feel safer, and that's where the Philippine Coast Guard's upgrades hit home. For coastal communities, confidence comes from knowing help isn't theoretical. Faster vessels and better SAR coordination reassure fishers, ferry operators, and island communities that distress calls won't vanish into bureaucracy or distance. When people see Coast Guard ships arriving quicker, staying longer, and operating more professionally, trust builds naturally. It's not about fear, it's about reliability. That confidence changes behavior. Fishers are more willing to work farther offshore. Passenger vessels follow safety rules more closely. Communities engage rather than hesitate. Presence reduces panic. The PCG is also leaning into public education and maritime safety awareness. Campaigns focused on preparedness, proper vessel operation, and emergency response give communities tools, not just instructions. In a country where storms can turn deadly with little warning, awareness isn't optional, it's resilience. The more the public understands how the Coast Guard operates, the faster coordination becomes during real emergencies. That shared understanding shortens response time before a ship even leaves port. Safer seas quietly support livelihoods. Fisheries benefit when law enforcement deters illegal operators. Tourism improves when safety standards rise. Trade flows more smoothly when ports and sea lanes are secure. These gains aren't flashy, but they compound over time, especially in maritime-dependent regions. The current upgrades aren't the end state. Looking ahead, the PCG is expected to explore drones, AI-enabled surveillance, and unmanned surface vessels, tools that extend coverage without overstretching crews. These systems won't replace people. They'll give them more eyes, more data, and earlier warning. It's the natural next step in modernization, persistent awareness without constant physical presence. By the 2030s, the goal is clear: a fully modern, self-reliant Coast Guard capable of handling security, safety, and humanitarian missions without scrambling for support. That means sustainable training pipelines, domestic maintenance capacity, and vessels built to last decades, not headlines. Environmental impact is now part of planning. New ships and systems are being designed with fuel efficiency, lower emissions, and disaster resilience in mind. For a force tasked with protecting the sea, sustainability isn't branding, it's credibility. The Philippine Coast Guard's fleet expansion and SAR improvements aren't just upgrades, they're foundational. They strengthen maritime safety, reinforce national security, and stabilize the economic lifelines that run through Philippine waters. As the country modernizes its maritime posture, the PCG emerges not as a shadow of the Navy, but as something equally vital. A professional, capable guardian of the seas, and a first responder people can count on when the ocean turns unforgiving. No slogans, no drama, just ships that arrive faster, and people who make it home.
We received the confirmation from Admiral Paparo himself. He said that this will still be the biggest Balikatan exercise despite the war going on in Middle East.
Come on! Come on!
81 years ago, more than 500,000 Japanese soldiers invaded the Philippines. They bombed Manila. They marched through Bataan. They occupied the islands for nearly 4 years. And by the time it was over, around 500,000 Filipino civilians were dead. The Battle of Manila alone killed 100,000 people, making it one of the most devastating urban battles in the entire Second World War. Now here is what is happening today. Japanese combat troops carrying weapons are about to step onto Philippine soil again. Not as occupiers, not as enemies, but as allies, for the first time since the end of World War II. And if that does not make you stop and think about how dramatically the world is changing right now, nothing will. But this is not just a symbolic handshake between former enemies. This is a direct military response to one country, China, whose navy has now pushed past the first island chain, past the second island chain, and whose aircraft carriers were spotted launching fighter jets near Iwo Jima itself, the same island where nearly 6,000 American Marines died fighting Japan in 1945. So the question is, what has China done that is so threatening that two countries with one of the most painful shared histories on Earth have decided we must stand together now? And more importantly, what does this tell us about where the world is heading? That is what we are going to break down today. Every layer, every detail, every angle that the mainstream media is not connecting for you. Before we go deep into this, if you are the kind of person who wants to understand the geopolitical chess moves happening in the Indo-Pacific before they hit the headlines, this is the channel for you. We break down what is really happening in the South China Sea, Philippine, defense, and global security every single week. So if you have not already, hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell, and let me ask you a question in the comments. Do you think Japan sending combat troops to the Philippines is a smart defensive move, or is it a dangerous provocation that could push China into conflict? Drop your answer below. I genuinely want to know what you think. Let us get into it. Here is the picture as it stands today, in April 2026. In exactly 14 days, on April 20th, the largest joint military exercise in Indo-Pacific. History is about to begin. It is called Balikatan 2026. Balikatan. That is a Filipino word. It means shoulder to shoulder. And this year, it is not just the Philippines and the United States standing shoulder to shoulder. For the first time ever, Japan is sending several hundred self-defense forces troops, armed, combat-capable troops to participate directly in defensive military operations on Philippine territory. Let me say that again so it sinks in. Japan is sending armed soldiers to the Philippines for the first time since 1945.
We received the confirmation from Admiral Paparo himself. He said that this will still be the biggest Balikatan exercise despite the war going on in Middle East.
General Romeo Bronner Jr., the chief of the armed forces of the Philippines, confirmed it publicly. He said, and I am paraphrasing here, that Japan has moved from being observers in previous years to actively deploying combat troops. He estimated up to 1,000 Japanese soldiers could be on Philippine soil. And he added something remarkable. He said, from being on opposing sides in the past, we are now working together as partners. Think about the weight of that statement. The last time Japanese combat forces were in the Philippines, they were fighting against Filipinos. The Bataan Death March, the Battle of Corregidor, the destruction of Manila. These are wounds that have not fully healed even after 80 years. And yet, here they are, standing together. But it goes beyond Japan. Balikatan 2026 will also feature Australian forces, French warships, including an amphibious assault ship and a frigate from France's Jeanne d'Arc mission, and observers from multiple NATO countries. The exercises will span across the Philippine archipelago, from Luzon in the north to disputed waters in the west, and will include live fire drills, amphibious operations, cyber defense exercises, and for the first time, space-related military operations.
Detected holding point 14 left.
The armed forces of the Philippines chief also revealed something critical. He said the exercises will draw heavily from lessons learned in two active conflicts, the Russia-Ukraine war and the United States war with Iran. Specifically, the importance of cyber warfare, the ability to disable radar systems, knock out command centers, and paralyze enemy communications before a single shot is fired. Admiral Samuel Paparo, the commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, personally confirmed that despite America's ongoing military operations in the Middle East against Iran, the scale of Balikatan 2026 will not be reduced by a single unit. He said this will be the biggest Balikatan in history, period. And that should tell you something. When the most powerful military in the world is fighting a war in the Middle East and still says, we are not pulling a single soldier out of the Pacific, that means the Pacific is where the real long-term game is being played. So, what is behind all of this? To understand that, we need to go back in time. On December 8, 1941, just 10 hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japan launched its invasion of the Philippines. More than 500,000 Japanese soldiers would eventually serve in the Philippine campaign. Manila fell in January 1942. The American and Filipino forces retreated to Bataan, where they fought desperately for 3 months with almost no food, no medicine, and no reinforcements. General Douglas MacArthur promised help was coming. It never did. When Bataan fell in April 1942, roughly 75,000 American and Filipino prisoners of war were forced on a brutal 65-mile march to their prison camp. Thousands died along the way, beaten, bayoneted, shot, beheaded by their captors. The world would come to know it as the Bataan Death March. The Japanese occupation lasted until 1945. When the liberation of Manila finally came, the Japanese garrison fought to the death. They massacred civilians. The Battle of Manila reduced the city to rubble and killed an estimated 100,000 people. It was one of the deadliest urban battles of the entire war, mentioned alongside Stalingrad and Warsaw. By the end of the war, approximately 500,000 Filipino civilians had perished under Japanese occupation. So when we say Japan is now sending armed troops back to the Philippines, understand the historical gravity of that sentence. This is not a minor diplomatic development. This is two nations choosing to set aside one of the most painful chapters of the 20th century because they see a threat so serious that the wounds of the past must be put aside. And what makes this moment even more extraordinary is how it happened. The legal foundation was laid in July 2024 when Japan and the Philippines signed the Reciprocal Access Agreement, a defense pact that simplifies the process of deploying troops and equipment between the two countries. The Philippines became only the third country in the world to sign such an agreement with Japan, after Australia and the United Kingdom. That agreement entered into force on September 11, 2025. It was built on top of years of quiet cooperation. Japan has become one of the Philippines' most trusted partners, providing Coast Guard vessels, radar systems, and official security assistance. Public opinion polls show Japan enjoying remarkably high levels of trust among Filipinos, something that would have been unthinkable just a few decades ago. But here is the thing about trust. It is not built in good times. It is built when both sides look at the same threat and decide, we need each other. And that threat has a name. Japan is not just sending soldiers to Balikatan. What Japan is doing right now is far bigger than one exercise. On April 5th, 2026, literally yesterday as I am recording this, Japan's defense minister, Shinjiro Koizumi, stood on the island of Iwo Jima, the same Iwo Jima where nearly 6,000 American Marines and nearly 20,000 Japanese soldiers died in one of the bloodiest battles of World War II. And from that sacred ground, he made a stunning admission. Japan, the third largest economy in the world, a country that spends billions on defense, just admitted that it has a gaping hole in its own security on its Pacific side. They are planning to build port facilities capable of handling large military vessels. They are considering installing floating piers to bring in construction materials. And here is a detail that is genuinely remarkable. Japan is looking at establishing an air defense identification zone over the Ogasawara Islands, where no such zone has existed since the end of World War II. That means for the first time in 81 years, Japan would formally monitor and control the airspace over these Pacific islands. Why? Because in June 2025, something happened that shook the Japanese defense establishment to its core. China's aircraft carrier Liaoning was spotted operating east of Iwo Jima, conducting F-fighter jet takeoffs and landings in the waters between Japan's remote islands. This was the first time any Chinese aircraft carrier had crossed the second island chain. And it did not come alone. China deployed both the Liaoning and the Shandong simultaneously in the Western Pacific. Another first. Japan's defense ministry tracked close to 520 takeoffs and landings across both carriers during that deployment. This is not hypothetical. This is happening right now. But Japan is not doing this alone. And the coalition forming around the Philippines is something Beijing never expected. Let me walk you through who is showing up in the Philippines right now. Because this is not just a US-Japan story. This is a global response. The United States remains the backbone. Washington has approved more than 500 joint military activities with the Philippines for 2026 alone. That is more than one per day. It is the most in the history of the alliance. And the US is not just sending troops, it is deploying some of its most advanced weapon systems. The Typhoon Mid-Range Capability Missile System, a ground-based launcher capable of firing Tomahawk cruise missiles with a range exceeding 1,600 kilometers, has been stationed in northern Luzon since 2024. From that position, those missiles can reach deep into southern China, covering major People's Liberation Army facilities and key maritime corridors across the entire South China Sea. The U.S. also deployed the Navy Marine Expeditionary Ship Interdiction System, an anti-ship missile system to Batan Island in Batanes, the northernmost Philippine province, directly facing the Bashi Channel. That channel is the critical waterway separating the Philippines from Taiwan, and it does not stop at missiles. A US-led group of 16 nations called the Partnership for Indo-Pacific Industrial Resilience has agreed to explore building an ammunition assembly and production facility right in the Philippines. When asked about this, China's foreign ministry spokesperson issued a warning. He said, and I paraphrase, that if the Philippines is willing to become a powder keg and ammunition depot, it will only backfire on itself. That is how seriously Beijing is taking this. Now France. The French Navy is deploying its largest Balikatan contingent to date through the Jeanne d'Arc training mission, including the amphibious assault ship Dixmude and the frigate Aconite. Last year, France deployed the Charles de Gaulle Carrier Strike Group for a joint patrol, with the Philippines in the South China Sea, the first of its kind between Paris and Manila. France has also committed to providing 40 patrol vessels to the Philippine Coast Guard and is building a shipyard in the Philippines to construct half of them locally. Australia is expanding its role. Canada signed a defense cooperation agreement with the Philippines. The United Kingdom has a reciprocal access agreement with Japan. South Korea is watching closely. And here is what makes this coalition different from anything we have seen before. This is not just America and its allies doing exercises for show. This is an integrated military architecture being built in real time with forward-deployed missiles, ammunition production facilities, reciprocal troop access agreements, and shared intelligence networks